Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, where we have just gotten back from rescuing Tralee from orbit of the moon, and we got our science data from the surface of the moon, and we got our science data from the space around the moon. In fact, we cleared up nearly all of our contracts. The only contract we did not get is our surface deployed mystery goo observations, which we will get eventually. But what I want to do right now is think about some communication satellites. Now, there is always the World First Records Keeping Society, which we should do. Dock 2 vessels on or around Kerbal. Sure. We'll grab that. I'm not sure when we're going to do that. It's probably a not now sort of thing. Repair a satellite in orbit of the moon. That's not really what we're looking for. Surface deployed mystery goo observation science from the surface of MinMIS. This is something that will happen. We'll grab that. But it's not a right now thing either. To be honest, a lot of these aren't particularly great. So we're probably going to want to just do our standard... an adjusted orbit of Kerbal. We're probably just going to want to do our standard setup here. Rescue Lobus from the surface of the moon. I mean, that wouldn't be bad, but I think for now we're just going to do a satellite without a contract. So I want this to be a pretty long period satellite. And let's go into the tracking station and talk about where we're going to put up satellites. I want to do several here. Satellite number 1, and we can get rid of that. Satellite number 1 will likely be equatorial, out at the very edges of the Kerbal system. Out here. And then we'll probably do a polar orbit one out at the very edges of the Kerbal system as well. That will likely do most of our communications needs. One of those will be in range from most places at all times. Not all of them, but most of them. Now, one of the worst locations for that would be the far side of MinMIS. For that, we'd probably need a special relay satellite. But I believe that anywhere from the moon, we would likely have something, not necessarily all the time, but most of the time. Well, maybe like half of the time. It would depend on how their periods were set up. But we could also have an equatorial and a polar orbit around Moon and MinMIS, and between those 6, that should do the trick. Now here's the question. Do we launch these all in one go? We definitely could. I'm going to terminate these suborbital trajectories. They've been kind of... I was expecting them to crash, but that's not how that works. We're just going to get rid of the debris. We don't need to be tracking it. Okay, this one we don't appear to be able to... Oh, there we go. Now we can terminate it. Cool. So we know that we're going to need to put up a total of 6 satellites. So what if we were to try to lift these off all at once? And do this all in one combined mission? I think that's probably the best way to go forward. Our heavy lifters should be capable of this. We don't need all that much weight in the actual vehicle, right? So what we do here is we open up the moon landing machine will be fine. We'll change out this module up here. So I think we're going to switch off our upper stage here in total. So we're going to ditch the fuel tank adapters. Actually, that's not what I wanted to grab. We're going to ditch everything up here. This will stick around. All of this will go away. And then we're going to put in simply a very, what is the lightest probodobodyne we can put in? The Octo and the Hex are exactly the same in terms of their weight. Slightly less electric charge on the command for the probodobodyne Octo. I'm just mostly wondering reaction wheel. 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Okay, fair enough. We're going to go with the probodobodyne Hex. I would go with a remote guidance unit if we had that unlocked, but we don't. So this is going to form the basis of what we're going to do. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to look for a tricoupler, flip it around, put it on like that. Is it ugly? Yes. Is it functional? Also, yes. So from here, we're going to need to build our satellite. So the satellite's going to be extremely basic. I think a T400 would be probably overkill. So we're going to need decouplers here. I want the decoupler to detach still connected to this. So we'll put a decoupler here. That's too big. A TD12. There we go. We'll tri-couple that. And it'll be something kind of like this. Then, T200s should be more than sufficient. We'll put on top of each of these a Propidopadine Octo, I believe. Let's see here. We need a pod for that. Propidopadine Octo is maybe too small. Propidopadine Hex is maybe too big. Or not. No, they're both the same size. Okay. We'll just run an Octo. That'll be fine. Okay. And we're going to need some power generation on each of these. So we will put in simply a 1x6, and we're going to bi-couple those. So we're going to put those in, say... I don't love that positioning. We'll just do it here. And if we made it be over here, that would be viable. Cool. Now, what else do we need on this? We need a thermometer so that we can get science readings, if we have a contract for that, very easily. So a thermometer is going to be extraordinarily cheap. Actually, a barometer is a little cheaper, but we'll just do a thermometer. And we only need one of those. Now, we don't need to think about re-entry here, or anything along those lines. So that'll be fine. And I'm just thinking, how do we want to attach this up here? Well, first off, we're going to need our communications. So we need a relay antenna. The best that we can do right now is going to be the RA15. That would go kind of like this, or we could mount it like this. And I think that'll fit in best. This is going to be a heck of a fairing, but something kind of like that. We could clip it together, but I think when we detach this, it might blow up. If we rotated this around to be on the other side. Like, if we hypothetically placed it in here, right? That'll be a lot better. But when we decouple this, will it blow up? That's a question. And one that we should figure out the answer to. We'll do that in a moment. Actually, now is a decent time. I'm going to just toss in... Actually, I don't think we need anything else here. I think we can upgrade this at this point to one of these guys. Make sure that it's colored like that. There we go. Actually, I want it to be pure white. What's our liftoff thrust to weight? 1.47? That's viable. That is viable. This is more fuel than we need. I can guarantee you that. So let's actually bring this back to a 32. It's going to be a lot less weight and quite a bit cheaper to boot. Okay, so something like that. Now we need to get a strut connector. I want to make sure that we don't have any issues over here. So I'm going to connect those straight up like, I guess that'll work. Sure. And we're going to need a fairing on here too. So we can drop that down and let's put on a 2.5 meter fairing. Do we not have 2.5 meter fairings? Hang on. Apparently we don't have 2.5 meter fairings. That's exciting. Okay, so I'm going to save this as the multi-satellite machine. Cool. We'll save that, and let's go see if we can grab ourselves a 2.5 meter fairing. For some reason, I thought we'd have that, but we apparently don't. So let's hop on over. Any moment now, KSP. You've got this. Okay, so we're going to hop into our R&D here. We've got 521 science. So aerodynamics. Is this where we get the 2.5 meter fairing? No. Specialized construction. Where do we get the regular fairings? Here. Yeah, that's the 2.5 meter fairing. Okay, so we'll grab that. That'll be great. Fantastic. Okay, so now we can toss in our 2.5 meter fairing. So we will certainly do so. That will be not here. That'll be this guy. Fantastic. And we'll build that on up. We are going to run a simulation of this fairly soon here. Kind of like that. It's slightly bulbous, but it'll do the trick. Of course, we're going to have to actually delete this fairing because we're planning on this being a decent amount taller. So that'll be fine for now, and we don't need it to be quite that bulbous, I don't think. But let's go ahead and save this and put it on the pad because I want to test our detachment and see if those antennae will blow up. So we are going to revert this. We're only checking to see if this will work, or if we have to put the antenna on the outside. Obviously, we have no engine on these, and that's a bit of a problem. But let's see. So we decouple this. Okay, so now we know. That told us what we needed to know. So we will revert that back as expected. I'm not shocked about that. Cool. So we do need an engine on here, and we will just rotate that around so that it goes on like that. But let's put on an engine here. We're just going to put on a pug. We really don't need anything else. So that'll be fine. A pug, and then that's our full satellite. Now we're going to need to duplicate this satellite. So that's going to be interesting. Okay, so we're going to need decouplers, and these will be TD25s or TD12s. TD12s will work. Why am I talking about TD25s? So I'm just going to duplicate everything here, and we're going to put in a TD12 here, and we'll put that there. Now the question is, these decouplers, where do they stay? We also want to probably put in a strut connector up here just to make sure we're not going anywhere, like that. Just to strut them together until such a time as we decouple. Okay, let's put that on the pad and see what that decouple looks like. This will be under full gravity, which is, of course, not a situation that we're going to be in, but we'll see. Okay, what do we got here? So, we're going to decouple that. Okay, noted. So, if you notice, this decoupler stayed here, and so did the shroud. That's kind of weird. That's kind of weird indeed. It staying here isn't the worst thing, to be clear. So we're going to revert that back as we expected. We're just testing to see exactly how that was going to work. So, leaving the shroud here isn't awful. I think it's actually fine. I think it is actually fine. So at this point, let's go ahead and build our fairing, and we're going to bring this guy out. We're going to need it to be fairly wide, actually. So like here-ish. Oh, hello. There we go. We bring that up to be about here. And it's definitely bulbous. There's no doubt about that. But with those antennas sticking out, we don't really have too much of a choice. So the question now is, how top-heavy are we? Let's look at our center of mass and our aerodynamic overlay. That's not too bad. Okay, looking at our thrust to weight here, 1.55. So this is still less weight up at the top than our lander. I think it's good then. It's actually remarkable to me that that's less weight than our lander. Hang on, I want to double check that. 1.55 versus the moon landing machine. And this is also almost exactly the same cost as our moon landing machine. 1.47. This is, in fact, less weight than our lander. Wow. Well, I think a big part of that is because we're ditching this fuel. Now that I think about it. I think that's probably why that's the case. So let's go ahead and grab our... Let's see, I called it the multi-satellite machine. Okay, so we're going to launch 6 satellites here. Now, all of this should be strutted together reasonably well. We shouldn't wiggle around too much, but I want to test the aerodynamics of this thing. That is a lot of weight in that fairing. I'm not expecting major issues here, to be clear. But I want to test the aerodynamics. If this goes poorly, we will revert it. If this goes well, for the sake of time, we will graduate it to a real flight. But I don't know. Maybe I should just do a real flight here. It should be okay. However, we do need to double check our staging here. Our staging looks like hot garbage. Okay, let's hop on back to the VAB. I want to do that in the VAB where we can actually see what we're doing. So that'll be fine. I do want to make sure that these decouplers are not happening here. These will all happen up here. We're going to, in all honesty, manually decouple that. So same thing here. The fairing, we're going to manually decouple as well. So I'm going to toss that up into this stage 0. Okay, that's fine. This is not fine. So we're going to probably manually activate these engines as well. So it's just simply going to be something like this. Very, very basic. Okay. So this should, emphasis on should, this should do the trick. We're going to do a real flight here. No reverting. It's probably going to go poorly. No, in all honesty, I think it'll be fine. I really, really do think it'll be fine. It's less weight at the top than our previous lander. And that is, of course, because we've shortened this stage, but it's still less weight, so it should be fine. And we had more than enough fuel to get this whole thing to the moon previously, so we should have no problem getting this into orbit, which is all we're trying to do, is get this into orbit, and then we'll navigate using the onboard fuel. So that'll be fine. Let's go ahead and lift on off. How are we going? Looks pretty good, to be honest. Let's start heading over a bit, and let's just lock to prograde. Now, we don't have any KER on here, so we're going to have to go into maneuver mode and keep an eye on our orbit down here. But that's completely fine. No real problem there. And we don't have a ton of batteries on this, but to be honest, we don't need them. We just need to actually remember to extend our solar panels after we are no longer burning off all of our fuel here and turning it into electricity via the alternator. Okay, so we can see that our time to orbit is, or rather our time to apoapsis is increasing. This is good. This is very, very good. And we're holding very stable. I don't really care about being at 92 degrees inclination. It's not perfect, but it's fine. I'm not concerned about that. Time to apoapsis is still increasing. We can try to pull it down a little bit here. And just correct that slightly. Now we got it down to 91. Okay, something kind of like that. We're going to have a detachment here very soon, so I'm not going to try to do any fancy maneuvers right now. 3, 2, 1, and 0. Clean detachment. Beautiful. Time to apoapsis is holding. Our apoapsis is quite low right now. But we are pushing it up at a decent clip. And time to apoapsis is increasing. So this heating here is not a problem due to the fairing. And it should be absolutely fine. 45 kilometer apoapsis now. But more importantly, we're getting a whole lot of horizontal speed. That's the primary goal here. 50 kilometer. We're going to target, I think, like a... maybe even like a 200 kilometer orbit for this. I'd like to use up basically all of this fuel. Or close to it. I'm just thinking here. Our farthest ones are going to be orbiting Kerbal. It's a little awkward, but it should be fine. Cool. So our apoapsis is 80 kilometers. I think we'll target 200 for now. We'll just push that right on up. We're at 120. We've got plenty of fuel here. 150. And 200. Cool. So we'll park there for now, and at this apoapsis, we will circularize. Okay. It switched very swiftly. There we go. Something kind of like this will do. Beautiful. So we can ditch our fairing at this point. There's no point in keeping the fairing around at this altitude. There we go. Fairing is out of here. And we're going to be hitting space soon. We're like 10 minutes away from our apoapsis, though, so as soon as we're out of orbit here, or rather out of atmosphere here, we could start actually pitching over. Yawing over, I suppose. Let's see, I'm just checking in on where these are pointing. That's not necessarily ideal, but sure. I'll extend like this solar panel for now. We can't actually retract it, so I'm only going to do the one. We're on the dark side, so that's fine. And we're going to warp over to this new position very shortly. This thing does not turn very speedily, but we're not shocked about that. How are we doing on our electric charge? It's not great. So we're just going to turn SAS off. And we're just coasting. Cool. So over we head, and we should not be draining very much electric charge, although we are draining some. These aren't in hibernation. They probably should be, in all honesty, but it's fine. Okay, we will hold here. And we could definitely enter hibernation on these. There we go. And this one will need to start warping. And finally, this one. Cool. So that'll be about a minute, and we do have some electric charge left, so we will continue to warp forward. Cool. And here comes the sun. So now our electric charge is filling up, no problem. We're going to commence our burn here in 1 second, and right now, we're circularizing. Fantastic. We'll call that probably good enough. Yeah, we'll call that good enough. Okay, so now the question is, where do we want to take these satellites to? Well, we've got a lot of Delta V left here. So I kind of want to push us out at least partway to the moon. At least partway. We could deploy our satellites here, though. And we'd have more than enough Delta V to, like, deorbit this. This is clearly overkill. We didn't need this stage. Well, that's fine. This is why we didn't extend it. So, for the time being, there's no detachment over here, keep that in mind. For the time being, we could just start detaching these guys. It's a possibility. So, we would unhibernate this guy, and we would decouple. It tumbles off in a slightly awkward fashion, but we'll get that under control. We'll extend our solar panels. The tumble will stop. And there we go. Beautiful. So now we've got this guy ready to go. And we can send him wherever we want. We need to activate this engine. That would help. There we go. And we can see we have like 4,000 Delta V in this thing. So, first thing I want to do is I want to push this guy out to be our big equatorial orbit. So, we push it out to almost escape velocity. Something along the lines of that. Cool. And we'll position for that. I think we should do our equatorials and then try to use this fuel to shift over into a polar orbit. And then go polar from there. I think that'll be the plan. For now, let's get our equatorials done. So we're going to get this guy roughly into position. It doesn't really matter too much where. I don't really like the angling this is at this point. I would have preferred if this was one tick over this way, but it's slightly lopsided. It'll be okay. We can just say that was for packing purposes, even though it really kind of wasn't. It was for lazy purposes. But we're going to start our burn now. Whoa, we're pulling way off. Okay. So that's because of our offset mass of this relay antenna. I was hoping that this would be enough to compensate. Apparently we have basically... Wait, our SAS wasn't on. That would help. If our SAS had been on. Now, this pug doesn't have gimbaling. I should have gone with the Terrier most likely. But what is the most thrust that we can get away with holding attitude here on? Let's take a look at our, not our orbital info, but at our docking mode here. We can see our pitch is currently making its way up a bit. Yeah, that's clearly too much. So I'm going to thrust limit us down to like 20%. We'll pull ourselves back up. This offset thrust is going to be a problem. This isn't wanting to go. There we go. Now it's going. Cool. So we'll position here, and I want to be in, like, not docking mode right now necessarily. There we go. This is the mode I want to be in. Cool. Okay, so we clearly can't hold at 20% thrust. That's fine. We don't need a huge amount of thrust here. So we'll go down to, like, 10% thrust. Can we hold here? The answer is, I think so. I think we can hold here. Okay, so 10% thrust is not ideal. I'm going to take it down to like 8. Because we're still pulling off a little bit. And obviously this is going to be a very lengthy burn. So that's going to be interesting. And physics warping is exciting. So this is going to be kind of tedious. Oh, okay. While physics warping, it's very sensitive. Okay, why is it fully failing here, but I have full control? Just SAS at this position, please. It's not trying to SAS at that position. That's weird. Can you please SAS at that position? Is it only a physics warp thing? If so, that's exciting. But this is something that I can do over time off camera. We don't need to do this the whole time here. So that'll be okay. This is definitely something that I can do over time. So we'll do that off camera and it'll be just fine. For now, it is time to put a cut in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, we'll see if these are all in position. I don't know if I'll get it done, but it's not super necessary right now. We just need to get it done eventually. So for now, I'm going to put that cut in. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings. And a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including Casserole, ALS Gamer, Kentuin, James, Shadowwolf, MLohan80, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Video Games Are Not Real, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Unisil, Kadra, Rogue Corvid, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video. And as always, I will see you all next time.